Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Economics of Sports. Again, I'm your professor, Robert Romano, and today we're going to talk about media rights. So, what are media rights? The first question we need to ask ourselves are, what are media rights? So think about it for a second. Define that in your head. When we talk about sports, what are media rights? And so how we define it is basically it's the agreement between the property, in our case, the sports property, the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, and the media source. It could be whatever it is, ESPN, ABC, the radio, internet, whatever it is, to broadcast the individual property sporting events. Okay? So the property, whatever it is, March Madness, the PGA, whatever that sports property is, and the media source, that media company who's going to broadcast this individual property. So that's how basically, in a nutshell, we define media rights. But more importantly for us in sports, we have this thing called collective sale media rights. A little bit different. What do we mean by this? What do we mean by collective sale media rights? So basically, it's an agreement amongst the members of a league, right? The teams, that specifically prevents teams from competing individually to sell their rights. Okay, to sell their rights to games, matches, whatever it is. So collective sale media rights are different. All right. Under collective sale media rights, that individual team, the New York Giants and New York Yankees, they're prevented from selling their individual game rights. Okay. So it's basically where a sports property, the NBA, MLB, and National Football League sign an agreement, right? So the owners sign an agreement to pool and subsequently sell their rights to their games to a selected entity. Okay, to sell to a specific entity itself. Okay, now why do we do this, right? And is this legal? Right. Number one is can we do this, and is this legal? Well, number one, it's why would you do it? Basically, it has to do with leverage. Okay, it has to do with leverage. If you have each individual team selling their games, the rights to their games, well, that gives a lot of product out there, right? But if you only have one, well, that limits the product. Now you think about supply and demand, that kind of stuff. So how this came about, let's think about this. So how this came about was back in the late 1950s. A long time ago, way before you were born, even me. So late 1950s, new commissioner Roger Goodell said, each individual team is selling the rights to their games. And that's great for some teams, but it's not so great for other teams. So the New York Giants, great. It was good for them, right? Because they're a big market. They can sell their rights, get a nice chunk of change. The Green Bay Packers, on the other hand, not so much. All right, small market. They don't really have that same value. So this gave teams like the New York Giants a competitive advantage. Right? We talk about this, competitive advantage again. All right, so this gave them a competitive advantage because they were making more money off their media rights. So Roger Goodell at this time convinced the owners to pool their rights together and let him, as the commissioner, negotiate and sell them to the various networks. Now, this worked, right? You would think, well, the big market teams would balk, but in all honesty, they didn't, because they saw it was in the best interest of the league. And in honesty, they made more money, ended up making more money collectively selling and pooling their rights than they did individually. So, all right, the next question is this legal? Well, no. It's actually, this pooling or collecting of media rights is a violation of the Sherman Act, right? The Sherman Antitrust Act. Luckily for the NFL owners, they got a lot of power and a lot of friends in Congress, and they persuaded the Congress at that time to implement what is known as the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961. Okay, basically the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961 allowed the major sports properties to pool and sell their rights to sponsor telecasted games, right? This allowed them. This was to say, nope, it's not an antitrust violation. You can do this. And this was done for the major sports properties, but not the NCAA. Right, the NCAA wasn't included in this. So for Major League Baseball, which really didn't matter because they have an antitrust exemption, the NBA and the NFL, they can pool their rights and sell them to a network. Perfectly legal under the Sports Broadcasting Act. Up until then, it would have been a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. All right. So you see how media rights are kind of developing here. And then you got to think about it. This was a time where traditionally the media rights were sold to networks that were free, right? Over the what we call over-air broadcast networks, ABC, NBC, CBS. So you as a consumer, right, you could just turn on the game, watch the game for free. Okay, the networks would basically pay for the rights to the sports leagues, but for you it was free. The networks would make their monies back through commercials. Okay, revenue for networks generated through commercials. So the teams, the leagues would sell the broadcasting rights to the networks. The networks would pay for them, and the networks would get a return on their investment by selling commercial time during the games. Okay, you see how that works? And for the consumers, it was free. We just clicked on ABC, NBC, CBS, watched the game. Okay, but then things started changing, right? Cable came in, ESPN, Turner, and then streaming services. Now this changed the format. This changed the business model to a certain extent because this brought a tremendous boom to both the clubs and the broadcasters. Right, this pay cable TV type of thing kind of changed the dynamic, right? Because within cable networks, let alone do they make their money, so they pay for the rights, they pay the leagues for the rights. Leagues give them the exclusivity, and under networks they sell commercial time and they make their money back. But with cable companies, they sell commercial time, but they also charge a carriage fee. All right, what I mean by that is like you in your home. I'm in my home right now. We have cable. We pay for that cable. All right, if we want ESPN, it costs us $4 a month. All right, or thereabouts. So all that money goes to that network, right? So let alone do they make commercial money, but they also make carriage fee money. Now this gives the cable network a lot more capital, a lot more money. So the bidding wars, they can spend more on bidding for the rights to broadcast major sports events. See how that works? Any questions on that, please let me know. All right. So it's interesting, though, if you think about this, right? This collective sale of media rights, because there's different bodies out there that have different interests, right? We have to balance these, right? The rights holders, the properties, right? What is their interest? Well, their interest is to make some money. The broadcast networks, both cable and over the air, and then there's the consumers, right? So each one of these has an individual need in the broadcasting of sporting events, right? So for the rights holders, they want to maximize their profits, right? If you're the NFL, you want to make as much money and sell to the highest bidder the rights to broadcast your games. Same for the NFL, the NBA, same for Major League Baseball. The broadcast networks, what do they want? Right? They got to pay for it. So what do they want in return? They want exclusivity. Right? They don't want to buy it and then see it on a different network. Right? So they're going to buy it and they're going to pay for it, and they want exclusivity. For the consumers, we want to watch the games. Right? We want to watch the games. And now here's where the dynamic changed. Right? It used to be we want to watch the games and we could just turn on the TV. Now, in order to turn on the TV and watch that game, we got to pay for it. Okay, we got to pay for it. We got to pay it through cable or whatever means to watch that game. So even though the rights holders are making more money, the broadcast networks are getting their exclusivity, we, as a consumer, as the fans, are now paying to view the games. But we got a lot more, not more with that too. We get a little bit more with that too, because we can watch the games that we want instead of just watching the games that the networks provide for us. Because I remember as a kid, whatever that game, Monday night game was, that's the one I had to watch, or that game on CBS, that's the one I had to watch. I mean, it is what it is, but now we have a lot more capabilities of watching the teams that we follow. Okay. And you can see how the money has media rights the cost of media rights has gone through the roof. Look at the National Football League, $10.4 billion. The NBA, $2.67 billion. The Premier League, a little over $2 billion. Major League Baseball, almost $2 billion. Bundesliga, $1.16 million. Right, $1 billion. So these rights, these media rights, started off as okay, some local kind of networks broadcasting the local team to these now. Wow, the National Football League making $10 billion. For the rights to their games, right? Over a 10-year period, roughly $1 billion a year. Wow. So you can see how this collective sale of media rights has benefited the leagues, has benefited the networks to a certain extent. It's cost them a lot of money, but benefits them. And even though it's costing us as the consumer and the fans some money, there is a benefit to that because we get to watch certain games that we wouldn't otherwise be able to watch. Now, I said earlier that this collective sale media rights under the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961 was only for the major sports properties. It didn't involve the NCAA. So this is interesting. So when you think about it, they've kind of done it anyways, right? Even though it may not have been authorized or legal under the Sports Broadcasting Act, there is this thing called March Madness, right? The NCAA Men's Basketball Championship that happens every year, right? This tournament began a while ago, began in 1939, right? So it's going on about a little over 80 years now. It was relatively small, 8 teams at the initial event, but it did grow, right? It did grow. Initially, they lost some money. All right, so you think about it, the NCAA men's basketball tournament initially losing money. They lost $2,500 the first year when Oregon defeated Ohio State, but the next year they started to show a profit. Right, they showed a profit of $9,500 when Indiana defeated the University of Kansas. So, as this grew and as the popularity of the men's basketball tournament grew, the network started getting involved. So by 1954, the NCAA was paid $7,500 to broadcast the final game. Excuse the error. To broadcast the final game. All right, well, that's a little bit of money. By 1963, they were paid $150,000 over 6 years to broadcast the men's basketball tournament. You see how this is growing. All right. 1972, the NCAA was paid $500,000 per year to broadcast the NCAA men's basketball tournament. In 1982, CBS under sports president Neil Pilson at the time agreed to $48 million for 3 years, or $16 million a year. To watch they paid for the NCAA men's basketball tournament. Okay. All right. This grew again, and in April 2010, they entered into a 14-year or $10.8 billion, $770 million a year to broadcast the NCAA men's basketball tournament. And it increased in 2016 by 8 additional years to $8.8 billion. So averaging out, a lot of money per year, almost $1 billion per year. Here's the breakdown. 2017, the NCAA received $761 million. This past year, 2023, $873 million. Right, just to watch the men's basketball game, to broadcast the men's basketball game. This 2-3 week tournament. All right. In addition, there's some other escrowed money and advances made to the NCAA by the networks that total, another $50 million per year. So the revenue generated from the NCAA in 2023 for just that 1 year to broadcast the games, $873 million, plus the NCAA was advanced $25 million, plus another $25 million is due, but won't be realized until 2025. All right, it's a lot of money. All right, even though they're not protected by the Sports Broadcasting Act, the NCAA has done a good job of leveraging this sports property and making some money for themselves. All right, the question you may ask yourself, well, where does the money go? Well, if you take my sports history class or one of my current issues class, that's where we talk about that. But for our purposes in economics, it's just the fact that there is so much money out there being generated. All right. So questions, comments, criticisms, please let me know. Call me, email me, text me, whatever it is you need. Hit me up on Instagram if you have any questions. If not, see you next time. Thank you.